Hello, good afternoon. My name is Lionel Neri, and today I'll be talking about the Yiddish language. I refer to it as an odyssey into the promising language. So, how is it that a language that was once so rich in culture and history quite suddenly came to be thought of as a dying language? Well, this language of Yiddish was spoken by the Ashkenazi Jews, Jews from the 10th century that were from Eastern and Central Europe. Now, this language is very similar to medieval West German, so its essential vocabulary is that. But it's also a combination of many languages. And before the Holocaust, it came to be talked much, spoken much in Yiddish. But because of that event, now it is spoken by small Jewish communities. And well, the question is it still a dying language? Where did it come from? How did it happen? And throughout the course of this presentation, I hope I'll answer some of those questions. So, when it comes to Yiddish in the Holocaust and today, before the Holocaust, there were 17 million people that were Jews, and around 11 million and 13 million spoke Yiddish. However, after the Holocaust happened, 6 million Jews died. 85% of those were Yiddish. So the language did take a hard hit there. And what happened from that afterwards was that the remaining Jews emigrated from their homes. Some went to Israel, did the trip Aliyah. Others went to the United States and assimilated into the New World Order. So, what became of Yiddish? So, like I said, it is now being spoken by small Jewish communities. The Hasidic are people from the Hasidic are Jewish people that came. There was a revival in West Ukraine around the 18th century, and it consists of those Jews. Then there are the Haredi people, the Haredi Jews, and those are the most Orthodox Jews. And well, take a look at these people and think. There's no intermarriage within the Haredi, interfaith marriage between the Haredi, and they live in isolated communities. Don't they have a chance of making a comeback? And it sounds like a good guess, but the truth is that they're very strict in their laws and values, and they are in isolated communities, so it's highly unlikely that that'll happen. Now, where does that leave the Yiddish language? And I quote from the Jewish Encyclopedia: while the use of Yiddish as a primary vernacular has been declining, interest in it, both sentimental and seriously intellectual, has been rising. In other words, it has taken an interest in academic, recreational, and personal. And what can I say? So, in the 1978, there was around that time. Oh, I know. So, taking that into account, you can see that it wasn't doing so much to increase in around the world. American Jews thought, hey, I mean, this is not going to help me advance in my American assimilation. I better learn English. And those that didn't know Yiddish were afraid to speak it. So later on in the U.S., there were some little revivals in Eastern Europe and Yiddish culture across America. On one account, Yiddish literature came to prove itself as great literature, exemplified by Isaac Bashevis Singer receiving a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1978. And in music, there's a group called the Climatics, and these made a contribution to klezmer music, American Jewish music. I'm going to talk a little about the Jewish history. So, in the beginning, around the 10th century, Ashkenazi Jews are attributed to have brought the Yiddish language. French and Italian Jews started migrating to German Rhine Valley. And so, I mean, I said that it has strong similarities with West medieval German. But it also has other language influences of, for example, Slavic, Romance, Aramaic, and Hebrew. It started getting some touches of Slavic when it was going through the Black Plague and the Crusades. The Jews had to move further along Central and Eastern Europe. These Jews had three primary languages: Aramaic, Hebrew, and Yiddish. Aramaic was like the language of study. It was used for learning. Hebrew was the language that they would use when they would read the Bible or pray. And Yiddish was used between the family. What these three languages had in common was the Hebrew alphabet. And I'm going to compare Hebrew with Yiddish. So, Yiddish. We know what languages it's comprised of: Romance, Slavic, German, and Hebrew. But Hebrew has the language family of being Asiatic. So it's different. Yiddish is like Central, Eastern Europe, and Hebrew is from somewhere else. Speakers worldwide. Now, just guess. How many speakers do you think know Hebrew? There are about 10 million speakers worldwide. Now, the Yiddish, there are 3 million, as of 2009. So it's really different. And Hebrew, they speak Hebrew. Well, it is like Judaism liturgy. So it's global. And how about the Yiddish? We're saying something about Jews going away from home, right? Well, they speak it in the United States, Israel, Argentina, Brazil, United Kingdom, Russia, Canada, Ukraine, Belarus, Hungary, Moldova, Lithuania, Belgium, Germany, Poland, Australia, France, and elsewhere. So you know that they speak this in small Hasidic and Haredi communities. So just just keep that in mind. Hebrew is the official language of Israel. Yiddish has no nation has Yiddish as the official language, but it is a minority language in Sweden, Moldova, and parts of Russia. The language organization that regulates Hebrew is the Academy of the Hebrew Language, whereas for Yiddish, it is called YIVO, and it was centered on Vilna, but it changed to New York. And like I said, it's not official language, so it's just like a de facto language, just something that they practice. So, how do the Jews look at these languages? The Yiddish is considered Mameloshin, which is translated to mother language, whereas for Hebrew, it is Loshin Kodesh, which is the holy language. The reason why this language has lasted so long is because it has been used for communication purposes over the centuries. Now I quote, "Practically, Jews with an education all over had a common language for communication through books, legal documents, published, written, and read in the language." Hebrew as the language has nouns, verbs, adjectives, but a sentence can be made without a verb. For the Yiddish, it needs to be specific with the verbs, with the pronouns, and with the articles. And it's important to take these two languages into account so that you can get a sense as to where they stand. They once used to be intricately connected to Ashkenazi Jew identity. And you can see that, well, Hebrew is still spoken by a lot of people, but not so much with Yiddish. There are some notable Yiddish writings I'm going to tell you about. The first sentence to have ever been recorded is in 1272 called Wormser Magser. And it has a sentence that is a blessing to whoever carries this little booklet to the synagogue. Then around the 1400s, epic poems in Yiddish were being made, one of which is called Shmuel book, which is basically the life of Samuel, romantically narrated as if he were a knight in Europe. Around the time that the printing press came to exist, 100 years later, around the 1540s, a lot of Yiddish writing was starting to spread out. And one book called Sene Rene comes into mind. And this little book comprises of what was read in the Torah and has homiletic and moralistic messages. It was considered like the woman's Bible by people for that reason. Modern Yiddish literature came about during the late 19th century. And there were three writers that they think are the ones that made that happen. Shalom Yankev, I.L. Peretz, Sholem Aleichem. And I quote, "The realism, irreverence, satire, and moralism found in the works of these three writers heavily influenced the development of Yiddish literature. It's significant because it deviated from the strict, serious subjects of academic Jews." And there are some important historical events from the Yiddish language. So, around the 1800s, there was a division of sentiments of the Yiddish language between East and West Germany. East Germany had people speaking Yiddish language that were growing by the millions well into the next century. And West Germans, there was like a Jewish enlightenment, and the pioneers wanted to focus on German. They found Yiddish to be crass. In 1908, there was an international conference about Yiddish. It was about whether they wanted to make Yiddish the national language of the Jews or a national language. It ended up being a language. Many issues were discussed about Yiddish, but they didn't pay much attention to that. And, well, here's the date. YUVA was established in Vilna in 1925. Later it was in New York. And there you can find extensive Yiddish history and how they lived, how the Ashkenazi Jews lived. Oh, this is a good one. In 1922, I quote, "When the Soviet Union had just formed, the communist government supported Yiddish schools, theater, research, and literature, as long as these were strictly cultural expressions without Jewish religious content." So awesome. I mean, Jews have been moving all over the place. And it seems like they have found a place that would help them in their culture. Kind of like a home, you know? But then Joseph Stalin came into power. And he saw Yiddish as anti-Soviet. So the purges came. And the one in 1937 had Yiddish writers and leaders arrested and killed. There was another one in 1952 called the Night of the Murdered Poets. And he killed every Yiddish writer. So they were heavily persecuted during the 20th century, as you can hear. And now I want to give you a sample of Yiddish. Blintz, a thin pancake rolled with a filling of cottage cheese or fruit. Ganef, beef. Gefilte fish, chopped fish with onion, eggs, seasoned and boiled. Gewalt, force, violence, a cry of alarm, help. Kibitzer, to look on cards. A giver of unwanted advice, a meddler. Maven, an expert or connoisseur. Mazel tov, good luck, an expression of congratulations. Mazuma, cash. Megillah, Scroll, a long or involved explanation. Shlemiel, from Hebrew, proper name Shelumiel, which is a name that means my peace is God. Schlep, to drag, to carry, to haul. Schlock, dregs, anything cheap or inferior. Schmaltz, rendered fat, highly sentimental and banal music or literature. Schmo, a foolish or stupid person. Schmooze, gossip, idle chatter. Schnook, a person easily imposed upon or cheated, a pitifully meek person. Schnorrer, to whip, a person who lives by begging or sponging on others. Zatvig, juicy, succulent, having a full, shapely figure. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to enjoy my presentation. Bye.